Well, we might all be staying home right now, but it's not stopping tech from being launched, apparently. This is the LG V60 ThinQ, and it's LG's latest flagship that, again, yes, comes for free, at least in most cases, with a dual screen case, just like the LG G8X did. Well, LG sent me one to borrow for review, so I figured I would try to do a complete walkthrough on it for you guys. Now, if you're not familiar, a complete walkthrough on this channel is where I try to go through every single feature I possibly can on a new device, so you guys are better prepared should you be in the market to actually go buy one. And with that said, there's a lot to go through. So, let's get started with the hardware. Firstly, the LG V60. I refuse to use the ThinQ branding at the end. It has a 6.8-inch FHD+ OLED display with a 20.5 by 9 aspect ratio, making it LG's largest phone screen yet. Something that some people will either appreciate or hate about this screen, though, is the fact that it isn't curved like most of the flagship devices that we're used to seeing. Personally, I feel the bezels around it just can't help but give it a slightly dated, less than look because of that, but for those that accidentally touch their screens while holding their phones because of severely curved displays, something I am actually guilty of, well, you won't have to worry about that at least. Now in that screen, we have a 10 megapixel front camera with 1.22 micron sized pixels. There's no pixel binning from a larger resolution down to that either. It's a 10 megapixel sensor with 1.22 micron sized actual pixels. It also has a 72.5 degree field of view, an aperture of f1.9, and a sensor size of 1 by 3.1 inches. Now the phone itself comes in two colors, classy blue and classy white. Aptly named, clearly. Actually, I do kind of like them. But they have metallic trims in a light gold or silver, respectively, with beveled edges and are covered in Gorilla Glass 5 on the front with Gorilla Glass 6 on the back. The phone is IP68 rated, meaning it can be submerged for up to 30 minutes at a depth of 1.5 meters. Also though, the V60 is MIL standard 810G, tested for shock resistance as well. Neither of these ratings apply to the second display, by the way, but we'll get to that party piece in a sec. Moving around the phone, we have volume buttons and a Google Pixel button that you can tap to bring the voice assistant up, or you can hold down to talk to her in a walkie-talkie-like fashion. The latter of which is actually quite handy as it, 1, allows you to not wait for her to decide that you're done talking, since as soon as you let it go, it knows. And 2, it makes it easier for her to understand you as it gives her less surrounding noise to have to try to isolate your voice through. At the top of the device, we have our SIM card and micro SD card slot tray to expand the 128 gigs of onboard storage that's included. On the right, we have our power button, and we have one of our dual speakers at the bottom. The other is in the earpiece, and LG claims they made them more balanced. We also have a 3.5mm headphone jack that LG continues to put a 32-bit hi-fi quad DAC in, so wired audio should sound a lot fuller than most devices. In between both of these, we also have our USB-C port that is capable of Qualcomm Quick Charge 4.0 Plus to quickly charge the 5000 mAh battery inside. I figured I'd try and do a test that's albeit not very scientific, but let's just use it to see how quick that might actually be. And while we're at it, here is my usage and my screen on time for the battery for 2 full days while I was using the device. Now granted, these are not very normal days. We are all under quarantine and I haven't really left my apartment except to maybe take a walk once in a blue moon that was very socially distant and pretty short. Regardless though, looking at that screen on time and my usage in general, it still is pretty impressive. The device also supports Qi wireless charging, which does actually work through the dual screen case, by the way, and they have a clever magnetic cable adapter that you can put on the included charger to be able to charge the phone through the case via that as well. Under the hood, we have a Qualcomm Snapdragon 865 chipset paired with 8 gigs of RAM. Security-wise, there's an in-display fingerprint scanner, and I have to admit that it feels a little sluggish and finicky to me compared to others, but it does work well enough, and we don't have any other option for facial recognition in the settings that I can find, so that's what we use. For connectivity, we have Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.1, and aptX HD for higher quality audio streaming, and sub-6 5G in all models except for Verizon's, who will have a custom millimeter wave model to be able to take advantage of their millimeter wave 5G network. For more information on what all that means, you can check out my decoder episode on what 5G is at the link below. Moving around the back, we have our centered camera system. Firstly, in here we have a time of flight sensor to help with depth information and make portrait mode and some AR functions work better. Then we have our main 64 megapixel camera with an aperture of f1.8 and a 78-degree field of view. The sensor is 1 by 1.7 inches in size with 0.8 micron sized pixels. Now, by default, these are binned in 4x4 squares in order to increase each pixel's size to get better low light performance and dynamic range with albeit less resolution. So we end up getting a 16 megapixel image with 1.6 micron sized pixels. Now that's not as large as the S20 Ultra and the Find X Pros of the world, so you won't see as much natural bokeh, the blurred separation between a subject and the background, as you would with those phones, but you do still get some. That main sensor also has optical stabilization, dual pixel autofocus, and instead of putting a telephoto camera on the back here in addition to the main one like they have in the past, tapping on the telephoto icon in the camera UI will actually crop the sensor to achieve a 2x zoom, and it doesn't look bad actually. Now, using this cropping method is the equivalent of putting the same lens that was meant for a full frame sized sensor camera on an APS-C smaller sized censored camera, for example. Because the sensor is smaller, or in this case they are using a smaller part of the sensor, the field of view that you see is that of if you zoomed in. You can actually also zoom past this all the way up to 10 times, but they said that after the 2 times, they no longer crop any further. What they do is they end up using a digital zoom from 2 times up to 10. Now, if you want to see some photo comparisons of this zoomed in and not, and just camera comparisons in general, you can head over to my Twitter, my Facebook, or my Instagram, all at TheUnlockr, as I post a decent amount there. Now, besides that main camera and its crop zoom, we also have a wide-angle 13 megapixel f1.9 117-degree field of view 1 by 3.4 inch sensor with 1 micron sized pixels. And can I just take a second to say that it's funny to think about how wide-angle lenses is now kind of like a standard on flagship phones now, and LG was the first to do it way back in 2016? I just feel like they could use a little credit. That's all I'm saying. Regardless, let's talk about the video capabilities. This phone can shoot in 8K at 24 frames a second, and it can also shoot in HDR10+, do 4K at 60 frames per second, and has a Steadicam mode to stabilize the video as well, but that mode brings it down to 1080p. Now, LG has added some interesting audio options using the 4 built-in microphones that we have on this phone. The V50 had 2, by the way. We have your standard stereo recording modes that works like you'd expect it to. But then we also have ASMR mode, which amplifies the subject so that you can even hear really soft sounds. The term ASMR stands for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response, and it refers to the feeling of tingling and relaxation that a person can get from hearing specific sounds, often associated with relaxed whispering. If all of that sounds ridiculous, please YouTube ASMR and really see how ridiculous it can be. We also have audio bokeh, they're calling it, which is similar to Samsung's audio zoom feature, which has the device try and isolate the sound of a subject that you tap on versus the surrounding noise. Now, let's dive into the various camera modes that LG has added. Time-lapse lets you record a video and select the speed at which you want the video to be sped up when played back, or you can select auto to let the device decide based on the length and action in the shot. Portrait mode uses software to blur the background behind a subject to create a faster aperture look from a mirrorless camera, for example. Sticker lets you add 3D AR stickers to a face, think like Snapchat or Instagram filters. Panorama, which is your standard panoramic mode to let you start taking an image and pan the camera to have it stitch multiple images together to capture a wider panoramic shot. Manual camera lets you manually control things like ISO, shutter speed, etc. Manual video, which is the same as manual camera but for video. Slow-mo. You can actually choose to have the entire video be in slow-mo, meaning that it'll record in 120 frames per second or so at 1080p, and then you can choose what parts are slow and which parts are not after, or you can select part-time slow motion, which lets you tap the screen while recording to record in 0.5 second sections, up to 5 in total per clip at a much higher frame rate for much slower speeds. YouTube Live, which is an integrated way to go live to YouTube directly from the camera app. AR stickers. This actually seems to just open Google Playground, which is their AR app for adding 3D items into the real world. CineShot, which lets you easily create cinemagraphs by taking a video, having it show you an image from the video, and then allowing you to draw on a part that you want to have in motion while the rest stays still. And 360 Panorama, which lets you take a full 360 panoramic shot. Now, besides these modes, there are a couple of interesting AI cam modes that are in the camera settings. We have Auto Scene Optimizer, which adjusts the color based on what it recognizes in the image. This isn't that interesting, frankly, as it's on most flagship phones now, and I personally don't like it. So on most phones, no, all phones, I just turn it off. Now, Action Shot is a little more interesting. When you turn this on, it recognizes an object is moving and then tries to minimize motion blur in the image, which is an issue that, say, Samsung phones have in particular in low light. So interesting to see that they're trying to make sure the same doesn't happen to them here. Composition. With this, you can go in after a photo is taken, and it'll show you what it thought was a better composition for the frame based on what it thinks the subject was. Something, again, that I don't think I'll ever use, but it's interesting. Now, let's talk about the more often than not included dual screen case. The case has an identical screen to the phone, even with the included notch for the camera that isn't there, as well as the hole for the speaker that isn't there. By the way, I'm pretty sure this comes down to the fact that they wanted to save on manufacturing costs, because having to make a new screen without a notch, etc. would cost a lot more than just reusing the same panel as the phone. The phone slides into the USB-C plug in the bottom, and the screen then uses the power and connection from that to operate. The hinge is a 360-degree one that allows you to position it from closed to folded all the way back, where it will automatically turn itself off if you do that, by the way, and anywhere in between, thanks to the fact that it's a pretty sturdy hinge. On the back, we have a small monochrome display that shows the time, date, battery level, and notifications. To use the case's screen, you have to tap the floating icon that appears and then select Turn on Dual Screen. After that, your second screen works very much like a separate phone in many ways. It has its own launcher home screen, its own wallpapers, annoyingly sometimes, because sometimes you just want to have the same one on both, but it's difficult to do on this phone. It's fine. And for the most part, you'll be using it with its own app open on it, and another one on the original screen. Now, you can go to the settings on the dual screen and enable any of the Google apps, basically the only ones that are in here, and the only ones that work right now, at least, with more to come later, hopefully, to span across both screens. But let's face it, the gap in the middle makes this look pretty ridiculous, and the fact that LG doesn't even enable this by default tells me that they don't really expect you to use it that way either. Now instead, it sort of feels like a dual monitor setup for your phone. You can open anything on the main screen and tap that floating icon to decide whether to move the content to the dual screen, swap the content with the dual screen, or move the dual screen content to the main screen. So that'll actually be pretty useful to anyone who wants to have a split app experience that's a bit better thanks to the much more room that's afforded by having dual screens as opposed to just using the one phone screen. There are also some interesting implementations that LG has added to make it a bit more useful too. For example, if you use LG Keyboard, you can actually move it to one of the screens. Then you can kind of use it as like a laptop, although not as comfortable or efficient, but you could. And similarly, maybe more useful to me, is the fact that you can use the included LG Gamepad app to either choose from a collection of controllers that they've included, or you can even create your own. And so long as the game supports Bluetooth controllers, you can make one and then have it map to any of the buttons on the screen. Now, taking this a step further, you can even make one of these for each of the different games you play. Honestly, pretty clever. Now, besides some of the customizations for the dual screen, it's running Android 10 with LG's own custom UX9 on top, so it'll run very similarly to any other LG Android phone. But let's go over some of the more standout features, most of which LG conveniently put in their own section of the settings called extensions. First, we have Smart Cleaning, which is a simple app to help you clear up your unused storage and memory on the phone, as well as test various hardware components yourself. Context Aware. This lets you choose to have various settings like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, sound profiles, etc. change based on whether you're at home, away from home, you're at work, away from work, etc. And you can have it auto-launch a specific app when you either plug in headphones or connect via Bluetooth. Next, we have a built-in screen recorder, which you can use by swiping down and tapping it in quick settings. They also have a setting here to include yourself in the video as either a photo or video, and you can adjust the size of you, which is neat. Dual app, this is something a lot of manufacturers now include, but it's handy for people who want to use two separate accounts for the same app by essentially installing two versions of it. And pen. So we actually have pen support, which is kind of cool. Now, I didn't see a pen available to buy on any of the carrier sites, and there wasn't one included. But apparently, you can buy a dedicated one from LG. There's been some rumors of this already happening in Europe, and I was told that it should be coming, but they don't know when, to North America at some point as well. Also, thanks to the inclusion of a Wacom AES driver installed on the V60, any Wacom AES-capable stylus should work. And also on the dual screen, by the way. All of this adding a bit more functionality to the device And there you go. The LG V60 is available now and retails for $899. And Verizon announced that they'll sell it with compatibility on their millimeter wave 5G network, like I mentioned, for $949. And that also includes the free dual screen, at least for now. And finally, we're done. Going to wrap this up as it's already gotten pretty long. I mean, you guys told me to go as in-depth as possible in these, so I just kind of hope that I'm not crossing a line with that yet. Hope you guys enjoyed this though. Let me know in the comments below what you guys thought of the video. If there's any improvements I can make, always trying to improve the series. And if you like this video, please thumbs up it or share it. It's greatly appreciated. Also, check out the rest of the channel if you like what you see there. Please subscribe and ding the bell next to the word subscribe so you get notified when I do new videos. As always though, regardless, thanks for watching.